In this module, we're going to explore the range of ICTs that are available to assist teachers in your teaching and learning, often called educational technologies. Now, we're going to look at the basic ones that every teacher should really have an understanding of and be incorporating a number of such technologies into your teaching and learning. So the number of apps and websites, and hardware and software and computer programs available for teachers to use in education is growing rapidly. Now, staying up to date with these, we discussed a little bit in our previous module, but having a basic understanding of the fundamental ICTs that are available for educational technology use is an important requirement for all teachers. And we're going to go through in this module the range of commonly used educational technologies being applied in the classrooms at the moment. Now, the first set of technologies that we're going to look at are presentation tools. Now, teaching has long been associated with the delivery of content or the presentation of content, typified by the lecture or the teacher-directed classroom where the teacher stands up front and talks to the students as they sit behind their desks taking notes or engaging in other educational activities. So there's a range of technologies that we commonly use to support this particular style of teaching. The PowerPoint is the most commonly referred to one. Keynote, which is the Apple alternative to the Microsoft PowerPoint. And these provide means of presenting a series of slides so that students can be engaged with summaries of the material being presented, normally associated with a teacher providing a commentary as they go through the slides. And notorious for their use of bullet point lists, where we use text to reinforce students' learning of the spoken content being delivered. Now, it has improved, and there are various means of making such slideshow presentations more engaging. The use of graphs and images and embedded video does provide a bit of variety in the presentation rather than just presenting text. And there are a range of different approaches that have been suggested to make such presentations more engaging, and various rules of thumb such as no more than 6 words per slide, no more than 3 concepts per presentation, consistent use of fonts and styles, minimal use of attention-getting devices such as sound effects and animations and things of that nature. And these can all be used to for different audiences for different levels of effect. Certainly for very young children, sometimes it is appropriate to use a lot of interactive or attention-getting devices on a presentation that you wouldn't use for a more adult audience. Now, there's a range of other technologies that go with this to help it become more effective, such as laser pointers, audience response systems, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then, of course, there's the interactive whiteboard, which we'll also talk about. And then there's slide casting and video casting, whereby we record what's actually occurring on the presentation screen. And sometimes, particularly with slide casting, we record the audio and synchronize that with the actual presentations, and various other tools that have been used to make the recorded presentation a bit more interactive. And indeed, we have some presentations that are broadcast over the internet so that people can participate live, or at least view it live. And we can always record presentations nowadays, which is a very common process, and people can review the presentation afterwards. So presentation software is certainly very common. Slide casting can be an effective approach, whereby we include the audio recording with the actual slide presentation. And you'll find that very commonly used at Griffith University, for example, with the lecture capture system, which records whatever's shown on the screen with the audio that's recorded from the speaker. Now, that has some limitations. It doesn't necessarily record the audio from the audience, so if it's an interactive presentation whereby you're asking a lot of feedback from the audience or having the audience participate in the presentation in various ways. That becomes more difficult. It also doesn't record the presenter themselves, as in a video camera recording the presenter, and it also doesn't record the audience. Now, I've done a variety of different approaches to that. One common approach is typified by the TED Talks, whereby most of the actual recording is done of the presenter, with very little emphasis placed on whatever might be being presented on a screen and so forth. And that can be very engaging, particularly if the presenter is not relying upon the slideshow presentation, but relying more upon their oratory skills. But it still doesn't get around the process of actually capturing or recording what the audience is doing. There is coming out a range of new technologies, such as wearable cameras, and I've used a little wearable video camera that you put on your ear, and you can record whatever you're looking at. So you can make a recording of the actual audience. And as you interview or ask questions of the audience, that can be recorded, as well as another camera that might be recording the presenter and that interaction. So it provides a bit more of an engaging process. Now, some students don't like that. They don't like the fact that they're also being recorded as part of a presentation. So it's an interesting balance to look at in terms of our concept of the lecture environment. Now, another technology that's becoming more and more popular are online presentation tools. These are very similar to PowerPoint or Keynote, but they're done via a web-based interface. Google Slides is a very popular alternative to that, and it's part of the Google application suite. So if you've got a Google account or a Gmail account, you've generally also got access to Drive, which gives you your word processor and spreadsheet, but also a presentation tool, Google Slides or Google Presenter. They keep changing its name, but you can check that. And there's an animation provided on a link here that will go through just what can be done with Google Slides and ways of doing it in a rather interactive or animated way. But there are other tools such as Slide Rocket, which also provides a similar online presentation environment. And this then gives various advantages in that it's very easy to share with the audience. You can also have it where students can work collaboratively on a presentation. They can all edit it live at the same time and collectively put together a presentation that might be either given live or simply given as a slideshow presentation. So just as we can work collaboratively on online documents, so we can work collaboratively with online presentation tools. And then they can be embedded in other websites and things of that nature. So it makes it a little bit more flexible in how we publish and share our presentations. Now, Prezi is another very popular tool, and this uses a slightly different approach. Rather than individual slides, you have one very large display canvas, a bit like a very large piece of whiteboard, but you can zoom in on various sections of that. So you can have a whole series of slide type areas of the canvas that you can zoom into and then move to other areas of the canvas, similar to how you would move from slide to slide in a more traditional presentation tool. But it can be rather engaging because it's very visually attractive. The dynamics of moving between the various parts of the presentation do engage the viewer more effectively than simply moving from slide to slide or having the transitions that go from slide to slide in common presentation tools. Again, Prezi can also be used collaboratively with students working together to produce their presentations. And it can also be used as a brainstorming tool because they can work on it at the same time. They can all add their material and slowly build up a sequence of information that can be useful in various project-based learning environments. So there's a range of different video clips and websites that you can look at there to have a look at Prezi. And Prezi also has various programs for teachers to engage with the use of Prezi, and you can become a Prezi U ambassador. But there's details on the course material for you to look at. in relation to that. Now, while the presentation itself has improved, we've also improved the tools we used to conduct the presentation. Now, interactive whiteboards have been very, very popular and deployed in almost every primary classroom and just about every secondary classroom now. They are expensive, but they have allowed us to have digital projectors in pretty much every classroom now. So that's been a great success. The actual interactive nature of interactive whiteboards has been less successful. Very successful in the very early years, where we want students to come up and have a tactile engagement with what they're doing, and it helps engage them with the activity. But it's still then only being used generally by one person at a time. Sometimes you can have multi-touch screens being used by a couple of students at once, but fundamentally it's still being presented as a presentation tool, which means the majority of the students in the audience are passively watching either the teacher or one or a very few number of students engaging with the interactive whiteboard at any one time. Now, there's some fantastic uses teachers have put interactive whiteboards to, and it can be a great engaging tool for educational use, but it does have limitations. And nowadays, LCD TVs and so forth are being seen as a more effective and higher resolution in terms of the graphics and the visual appeal alternative to the interactive whiteboard. But another technology coming along is the interactive tables. Now, this is basically an interactive whiteboard flipped so it's horizontal. Often now an LCD screen flipped so it's horizontal, although you still have some that use a projection process. And this generally allows between 4 and 6 students to sit around the table and interact with the screen and the software that's running on that screen. So this does have a few advantages. There's a couple of schools in the Gold Coast that have installed these now, but it's probably not being seen as a major replacement to interactive whiteboards. Particularly in the sort of lower to middle primary years, they are proving reasonably effective, where you can have students working collaboratively on tasks, and that tends to be the main way you have students working, rather than if they were using their own individual tablet devices, where they would tend to work individually. So it does promote some collaboration, but again, they are very expensive and tend to be a lot more expensive than the value that can be gained from providing every student with their own interactive tablet device, which does tend to be the main approach that schools are moving towards, particularly as the price of devices such as iPads and other Android-based tablet devices have dropped dramatically. And we're finding that giving every student their own interactive device gets over many of the problems that have existed with interactive whiteboards and to a certain extent interactive tables. Each student can then work at their own pace, and they're having an interactive engagement with the software that's running on the devices rather than passively watching 1 or 2 students or the teacher interactively operate the interactive whiteboard as an example. So that's pretty much where classrooms are moving to at the moment, using interactive tablets where every student has their own either laptop device or tablet device, and having them use that in lieu of using the whole class presentation tools. And some teachers now broadcast out from their tablet device to all the students, and so you can still do whole class presentations in that way. But since most classrooms do still have the interactive whiteboards or a projected device of some sort or LCD screen, more and more the teachers are using that screen to project from what's on their tablet device or their laptop onto that screen. And in some setups, the students can project from their tablet device onto the screen, or from their laptops onto the whole class screen, and share what they're doing when they need to do a whole class presentation, or simply working in smaller groups where they've got access to the larger screen for them to engage with. So a lot of this technology relates to screens, and having some sort of screen-based environment in a classroom to interact with. Now in the future, as you can see from some of the video clips that I've included in the readings, we're probably going to see a lot more of these screens incorporated into our classrooms. And in fact, it will probably become, in the not too distant future, maybe 5 to 10 years, every surface in the classroom will be some sort of interactive screen that students can engage with, be it the windows or the walls or the door or the surfaces of their desks, and that as they need to do things relating to computing and bring up some imagery or data or some process that they need to engage with, then they'll be able to utilize whatever surface is available for them to interact with that. And there's various predictions made around how those sort of surfaces will enable us to interact with the world. Now, in terms of what we do on all of these devices, we have what are called interactives. Now, these are little apps or software programs that run on our various devices, be they interactive whiteboards or tablets or laptops or computers. And they're small items of software that have some functionality. Often they're based around a learning activity or a learning objective, and there's a whole range of these that are available and various collections that have been produced. Now, most interactive whiteboards have their own collection. It's been one of the difficulties of interactive whiteboards in that they do tend to have their own particular set of apps and don't have a lot of interoperability between the various interactive whiteboards. Though that is changing with new technologies known as HTML5, which is a new way of presenting software, apps, just through a web browser. So you don't need to install the software or the app on your device. You simply go to the website and the interactivity is already provided through the experience of the website. But there are a range of collections being created. Education Services Australia has got a very large collection of apps that have been developed over the last 10 years, and the Australian government has spent many millions of dollars producing those apps. Now, we used to call them learning objects. There's a whole range of different uses of that terminology and so forth, but essentially they're small little, either little interactive programs, or they might simply just be an audio clip or a video clip that can be then incorporated into a learning process. Now, some organisations, including Education Services Australia, provide you to create a sequence of these interactives whereby students can move through a whole range of them, and sometimes there's a reporting process whereby they might do a quiz or a little activity that then indicates their success or failure in the learning, and that can be used to help manage that learning process. Scootle is another repository, or it's the more recent repository of Education Services Australia, whereby you can get access to the various learning objects that have been compiled. And as a student, you can request access to that by going to the Scootle website and going through the process of applying to have access to the database of objects available from Scootle. Now, a lot of schools, when you go out into practicum or into the workforce, will already have provided access to the Scootle database either through their own learning management system, or say for the case of Education Queensland, they've incorporated it into their own existing databases of learning objects. But Scootle is proving a useful way of getting access to the large collection of learning objects held by Education Services Australia. But there really are lots and lots of learning objects that are available all over the internet, and generally in much larger collections than available in the repositories that we've sort of established. So a learning object can basically have a range of different properties. So normally they'll have a learning objective, like what the learning object is meant to achieve. Sometimes they'll have learning prerequisites, what the students should already know about or be able to do before they use the learning object. There'll be some sort of topic or concept that they're intending to develop in students, and some sort of type of interactivity. Now, it might be just simply a presentation of information, it might be a game, it might be a drill and practice type activity. So there'll be various types of interactivity. And then there'll generally be some technology requirements. So it might run on Java, or it might be a Flash object, which means it won't run on iPad devices. So there'll be some sort of technology requirements for it as well. Now this is known as metadata. Now you can have lots of additional metadata. It might be, say, for a particular age level or a particular subject area. But there can be a huge number of other categories of metadata that help to define the learning objects. And the original intent was that teachers would create their own learning objects and would all be producing this huge big collection of learning objects, all described by various metadata so that you can find it easily and incorporate it into our teaching and learning. Hasn't quite worked out that way. A range of different reasons. The main one is that the learning objects have probably been a bit ambitious and that they try to cover too much. Because when you want to teach a concept, you try to teach it as effectively as you can. And if you're creating a learning object to teach that concept, you try to do that as effectively as you can. But the way you teach a particular concept may not be exactly the same way as others might want to teach that particular concept. But if you've encapsulated that particular approach to teaching in a piece of software, then it's very difficult to modify that. And so another teacher coming along sees that particular learning object, doesn't quite see how it matches exactly how they want to teach, and so they tend not to use it. So the reusability of learning objects has been a significant problem. Now they are working to try to address that, and they're slowly learning from the mistakes of the past, but in the main, a lot of teachers aren't using learning objects as it was initially hoped. So there are a range of other learning activities and learning objects that are available. Drill and practice has probably been the most popular, whereby we're using various small activities to reinforce student learning. Mathletics has probably been one of the most popular approaches to this, whereby we've got a whole lot of mathematics activities built into a game-based environment, and students compete against each other around the world, and it's been very effective in the repetitive reinforcement activities associated with the fundamentals of maths education. It does have a subscription fee though, but a lot of schools are paying that because of the benefits they see and the engagement students have with doing mathematics in this format, where they may not initially have engaged with maths education and the drill and practice associated with maths homework and maths activities as much as their teachers would like them to. But that's an example of a gamificated activity, and we're going to look at gamification in a later module. Now, there are some other advantages though for more complex uses of learning objects and learning activities and software. It's been around since the very first uses of computing, but the idea has always been that we can actually track students' learning and modify the software and how it presents information and the learning process to students based upon their previous activity. So the system learns how students are learning and then makes adjustments to account for individual differences in how students go about learning. So it might be the level. So if students keep failing a particular maths problem, then it will keep reintroducing them to that maths problem instead of just moving on automatically to the next type of maths problem or the next level of difficulty of maths problem. And some effective intelligence tutor systems will actually decrease the level of difficulty of the maths problem until students can then show success in solving the problem, and then slowly reintroduce it or introduce it in different ways to try to address the difficulties that the students are having in learning a particular problem. Now these can be very complex, and they do need to be because the learning process is a complex process, but they do have long-term advantages in that if we've got large numbers of students, differentiating the curriculum and addressing the individual needs of every student can be very difficult, if not impossible. And we're going to explore that in our gamification module, again, or our game-based learning module, where we'll have you play a computer game where you have to look after a range of students and differentiate the teaching to address the individual learning needs of each student, and just how difficult that can actually be when you know what's really happening in the learning process. But we'll talk more about that in a later module. So Really good intelligent tutoring systems, though, have three main aspects. The domain model, which is basically the knowledge about the concepts. So in maths, it's fairly easy, it's very cut and dried, but in other areas, presenting or encapsulating all the knowledge about, say, history or geography or computing, digital technologies, for example, in a piece of software can be very complex and difficult. And generally, we've got to get a lot of experts in so they can tease out all the really nuances of the content before it's then made available to students. There's the student model, which is really how students go about the learning process, how they engage with that content, and how their errors or their mistakes are indicated to the teachers or to the students themselves during that learning process. And then there's the tutoring model, which tries to learn about how students are learning and then modify the learning process or the student model to make adjustments to that learning and make it more effective for them. Now, the Khan Academy has got a very complex and developing intelligent tutoring system that's built into that, and it's a good example to have a look at, whereby, of course, they've got thousands of small YouTube videos which make their learning objects, and they can present those to students at different levels. They're building a large intelligent tutoring system so that it will look at, okay, what's the current understanding students have of various types of mathematics, as an example, and then present them various videos based upon the system's understanding of students' level of conceptual awareness about various concepts. But have a look at that. That's another good example of where intelligent tutoring is moving to. And yes, some teachers can see that as a threat to their own teaching. And in some respects it is, because it does enable computers to do things that teachers haven't been able to do, essentially differentiating instruction for large numbers of students, say 30 students. 30 students is really too many to really differentiate instruction. You might be able to meet the specific learning needs of a couple of students, but generally you tend to then clump the other students into various categories and teach to them. So you'll have your high achieving students, you'll have your low achieving students, and then you'll have your middle range students, which you tend to ignore. So there are some advantages to intelligent tutoring systems, but they don't meet all the needs. And as we go through this course of modules, you'll see that there's a whole range of things that educational technologies can do well and can enhance teaching and learning, but there are also limitations on that. And the role of the teacher, particularly in guiding and encouraging students through the learning process, albeit assisted by technology, is certainly going to remain in the fore. So, other tools that we can use, particularly in our presentation type teaching environments, are polling systems. This is why every student has either a little device, in which case they can indicate, instead of putting their hands up to say, okay, who understands this concept, they might press a button and indicate whether or not they're understanding or not understanding. Or the lecturer or teacher might ask a multiple choice question, and the students all indicate their response on the device, and it will then provide say a graph of all the number of students that got the answer correct and the number that got it incorrect. Or you could do interactive testing, like a little pop quiz. Give students a range of questions, and it will automatically incorporate their responses into a database, and you can use that to then later analyze how students have learnt various concepts. Or if you're doing it very interactively, you can actually try to analyze that on the fly during the actual lesson, and then based upon students' understanding of various concepts, modify your lesson to actually address the misconceptions that students are indicating through the quiz system. So there's various ways that can be done, but you can also incorporate various games and other activities through the use of this interactive device. So really it's simply a way of finding out what students are learning or thinking or having an understanding of as you go through a whole class presentation. So the most common form is a clicker, which then the teacher or the lecturer has a USB wireless receiver that plugs into their laptop, and it receives signals from all the clickers, the little handheld devices that each student is using, and the software that then runs on the laptop incorporates the polling. So a couple of ones I use a lot is Poll Everywhere and Votopedia. Votopedia in particular is useful because it's run by the CSIRO, or was, and it allows you to also poll using SMS or even phone numbers. So students can actually see a range of phone numbers on the screen, and then if they want to say answer A, they call one particular number. If they want to answer B, they call another number. And the same will work for SMS. They can SMS to a number and indicate A, B, C, or D, etc., and collect the data that way. But of course, nowadays, a lot of students will bring their own web-enabled devices to class or to university. They could do that through the web-based interface, either on their mobile device or their tablet device or laptop device. So web-based polling systems are probably replacing the clicker systems, which were expensive, and there was a time when we used to get students to purchase those as part of their textbook purchasing systems, but the effectiveness probably wasn't worth the actual costs involved and the complexities of setting it all up all the time. So it can be very useful and it can be engaging, but unless you're in a one-to-one classroom environment where all the students have got web-based devices already, it's probably not worth the effort involved in purchasing the clickers and setting up the systems and all the rest. So the next section we're going to look at is publishing. So we've looked at presentations. The other big area that's happening at the moment is publishing. Now, first area is probably websites. Being able to create your own website and publish material to that and share that with students, or indeed the world, has become a very trivial process nowadays. Creating a Google Sites, one of the activities you guys can do, and populating that with information and various other activities and resources is a very simple process now. And there's lots and lots of free websites that are available. You can also purchase your own online address. So for example, I've got a variety of ones, but jason.zagami.info is one I use a lot, and I pay about $10 a year to maintain that web address. So that's from a service known as a domain name system service. So there's various tools now that allow us to create websites, but in the main they use what's called a hypertext markup language, or HTML. Now, a lot of tools now mean we don't have to know HTML, but it's always a useful thing to learn so that you can make adjustments manually to websites when they go wrong and things are broken and the formatting is gone askew. And it's certainly a thing we expect most students to know in schools. So ePortfolios have been an extension of websites whereby we take a whole collection of resources and evidence of students' learning and we store that online and then make that available. Sometimes just available for the teacher so that they can then keep a record of students' learning throughout the year, for example. But we could also make that then available to parents and also to the students so that they can take it with them when they leave school or university, and they can then use it for job applications or in later courses. So for example, you might have access to the ePortfolio of students from a previous year and be able to see in great detail the actual evidence of their learning rather than simply relying upon report cards and other more abstracted evidence. So there's three main uses for ePortfolios. Developmental, so used as a means of teaching ICT capabilities. So the actual process of making an ePortfolio is in itself a means of learning about the technology involved in creating a website and uploading files and downloading files and things of that nature, putting images online, creating online video. So that's all useful in itself in terms of learning more about ICT. Very useful for reflection, where students can actually see their progress of their learning. Seeing how students, for example, say in language learning, recordings of their voice when they first start learning the language, comparing that with recordings of their voice towards the end of their course, can allow students to reflect upon just how significant their learning has been from when they first started out to where they are now. And then we've got representations, so showing learning or showing evidence of learning. And this is often used for assessment or external evaluation, such as job interviews and things of that nature. So a lot of things can now be automated with ePortfolios. Image automation has become very popular, whereby almost every photo we take on our mobile phones and things of that can be automatically uploaded to websites such as Picasa and things of that nature, or to Facebook or other social media tools. So there's various ways of having automated processes, and there have been a number of schools that have used that so that the students can use their mobile devices or say their iPod touches on a wireless network, and any photo they take is automatically then added to their digital portfolio. And so as a natural process of doing their classwork, students are constantly taking photographs. Also a great way of taking photographs of what you put up on a whiteboard or an interactive whiteboard. So instead of students copying it down, they simply just use their cameras to take a photo of it and have that incorporated into their collections. But you can do more than just photographs. Video recording and audio recording have become very popular parts of digital portfolios. So making short little video clips and ideally voiceovering those so that you have a bit of additional reflection has become a very important part of ePortfolio production. And you'll see that very much in our course, where you'll be asked to do various video clips of the learning that you do in the various assessment activities. So ePortfolios are very much something, though, that's established by an institution, such as a class or a teacher or a school or a university. More and more now, we're encouraging students to maintain their own personal learning environments. So not just relying upon institutions to establish those environments, but using all the different online activities and tools and technologies that students use all the time and incorporating that into their own learning. So for example, if you're maintaining your own blog, having that as part of your extended personal learning environment. You might have a social media account, say Facebook or Twitter. RSS feeds are where you get what other people put up on blogs or on websites and have that automatically put into a collection that you can then review. And likewise, things such as the photo albums and Picasa and other digital things, Instagram and all the other different environments whereby you can save and record lots of information. And managing that and turning that into an environment that assists your learning is a process where we're now exploring. So it's more like a dynamic ePortfolio that you incorporate all aspects of your life and try to help your incidental learning that you're doing all the time when you're browsing websites or going to look at YouTube or anything you might be doing that can then assist your learning process. Having that being able to be collected or added to a database, such as the bookmarking databases that we commonly use and things like that, favorites as some people might refer to them as. So there's a whole range of different processes that we can incorporate into your learning. Now, particularly once you leave the more formal learning environments, such as we have here at university, and you're going to be expected to maintain your own ongoing professional learning, using various technologies and tools to assist that. So when you've got a new unit to teach on ancient Egypt, the processes you go about collecting the resources and finding those and asking other people for help online, all those different aspects can be incorporated and built into a personal learning environment. So one aspect of many teachers' personal learning environments are blogs, which are really online diaries. Now, they don't necessarily have to be personal diaries. They might be a more formal diary. I maintain diaries or blogs of my research and various other projects I'm involved in. So they can be more formal than a more personal type blog. But we often get students, for example, to create a blog in a particular course. Now, I'm not having you do that for this course, but it's a very common process. And it does assist in students' reflection on their learning. Of course, the process of actually writing down what you're doing, collecting that into a sequential series of time-based writings about particular concepts and activities that you're doing can help the learning process, and particularly the reflective aspect of that learning process. And there are a range of different tools that are available for blogging. Really good one for students to do. Of course, it gets them writing and writing frequently. And that can be something that a lot of students in schools in particular have difficulty with. But there are some other advantages. Sometimes you can also support multiple bloggers writing on the same document or the same blog. So for example, you might have a class blog or a school blog or even just a project blog where all the students involved in the project can add postings or contributions to that blog as they work through their project. And you can then incorporate that into their assessment and other things. Similar to blogs, and I've given you a whole range of different examples of popular blogs done by various teachers and academics around the world. Similar to blogs, but in a more structured and formalized way, are wikis. Wikipedia is the best known, but really they're pages of website pages with information on them, and then links to other pages with information on them. So very similar to the internet and the World Wide Web, but in a more contained way, and often the hyperlinks are created automatically based upon keywords. So I'm sure you've all been familiar with Wikipedia, and if not, you should definitely have a look at it. But it's possible to create your own wikis. You could have a class wiki about various concepts that you're learning about, or students could create even a project wiki for a project that they're working on. And there's been some very good examples where students have created their own wikis, and games in particular, such as Minecraft and World of Warcraft and Lord of the Rings, have got really huge wikis that have been created simply by the people that play those or are engaged with an interest in those areas, such as the Lord of the Rings. The Minecraft wiki is incredible in size and detail, and it was all created by the players of that game themselves. There were no instructions ever provided in the game, or very little, and it's relied upon the players to create this massive Wikipedia, or this massive wiki, about the game environment. And there are a number of projects being developed to actually create textbooks in the same vein as wikis, and have collective textbooks so that all the teachers in a school, for example, could contribute to a set of textbooks presented as wikis. And indeed, all the teachers in the state or even internationally could all contribute to the textbooks. So collectively, we write textbooks, and then we don't have to worry so much around about individual publishers and the costs involved in that publishing process. It also allows you to have things more kept up to date and things of that nature. Now, I know there's some educators in the past, and still today, have had some concerns about Wiki in terms of its authoritative nature and the fact that anyone can make contributions and edits to Wikipedia. And there was a whole lot of well-publicized examples where people have gone in and made changes and put inaccuracies into Wikipedia. But compared to the print-based process, Wikipedia has been shown to be much more up-to-date and more authoritative than the obsolete print-based editions of encyclopedias, for example. There now is no longer a print-based Encyclopedia Britannica. It was basically made obsolete by Wikipedia. There is an online version trying to compete with Wikipedia, where they still maintain the expert model and try to keep that up to date as quickly as Wikipedia is. But in the main, it's failed, and most people will go to Wikipedia as their default encyclopedia before relying upon other organizations' encyclopedias. Some teachers lament that because they were used to having the encyclopedia being the authoritative source of information, but it's been well and truly shown that there was just as many inaccuracies in print-based encyclopedias as there have been in Wikipedia. But Wikipedia actually has a process whereby those inaccuracies can be identified and corrected, whereby print-based encyclopedias often took many years before such corrections were made. Okay, so it's possible to create your own wikis quite easily. There's a number of different spaces and websites available to assist you in that, and many schools maintain their own Wikipedias. So we've talked a little about the idea of publishing and creating your own textbooks. Now, we're not going to talk much about word processing because everyone is generally familiar with word processing. You've got Microsoft Word and Apple Pages as installed word processing software that I'm sure all of you have used. But there's also now the online word processors such as Google Docs and OpenOffice and Zoho. And some of the big advantages of those online environments are that you can collaboratively author, so all the students can write at the same time on the same document. You can also annotate onto those online documents, and that's very useful for providing feedback and providing responses to drafts. The other big advantage with a number of them is that you've got unlimited undos, in that every single change ever made to a document can be looked at, and you can restore the document to whatever point you need to in the past, and also see when changes have been done and when students have worked on documents. So it's a great way of actually monitoring students' learning process by seeing when they've actually contributed to the documents and how much work they've put onto them and when they've done that. But we've had a move now to eBooks, where we can also, because of the popularity of tablet and tablet-based computers, and also with the ebook readers themselves, which are somewhat limited tablet-based computers that just allow you to use digital books on them, they're becoming very popular and used quite extensively in a number of schools and school systems. The most significant ones being in California, where they're replacing all of their textbooks with ebooks. But there are a lot of advantages to ebooks. There are some disadvantages. There is an increased initial costs. There are some aspects in terms of, some of them in terms of their power and a whole range of other things, but they're improving rapidly. Now, iBooks Author is the authoring tool that I use for creating ebooks, or in particular a specific type of ebook called the iBook. But unfortunately at the moment it is only available to view on an iPad or on a Apple laptop or desktop computer. It does allow you to export them as PDFs, as we're looking at the moment, but you then lose some of the interactivity that's available in the pure iBook format. You can, though, publish through to the iTunes U and iTunes bookshops and distribute iBooks very easily, or you can do it through services such as I use Dropbox, where I simply save the files to Dropbox, make them then public, and provide you links so that you can download the files straight into your devices. Doesn't quite get the same readership as when you publish to iTunes U or iTunes the bookshop, but it does allow you to update things more frequently, and because Apple maintains a high level of quality control over their publishing processes, you do have to go through a number of steps in terms of publishing. It's not too onerous, not too difficult, but it's not quite as dynamic as many people would like it to be, myself included. But iBooks do allow you to incorporate little learning objects, little what are called widgets, which can have some interactivity, such as a YouTube clip or a Google map or a Twitter feed or various word processing documents, etc. They can be embedded into the iBook itself. So that does provide a lot of additional functionality. And iTunes U can also be used to create a collection of iBooks and other resources such as quizzes and so forth, and manage it similar to a small learning management system. And we're going to look at learning management systems again in a specific module later in this course. So there's a range of different iBook authoring tools that are available to assist you in creating iBooks. There's Book Creator and Scribble Press, and these are ones that you can actually create books simply on the tablet device themselves. But there's also tools that you can use, such as Bookery and other websites that will assist you in creating more interactive iBooks if you don't want to use the actual iBook author. So the other big area is graphics and video. Used to be a time when you'd have to take a special course, normally in year 11 and 12, to learn about how to edit video and edit photos. And we used to run courses on Photoshop and using various other video editing tools. But nowadays they've become so easy to use and so popular that pretty much every student learns how to create and take digital videos and modify those, and same for video editing. or same for still and video editing. But there are a range of different software and tools available that allow you to do these things. And if you haven't used them extensively, you can go and look at the various ones that are available, including a whole range of online photo editors such as PhotoFlexer, Picasa Web, PicMonkey, etc., that allow you to edit them online. So you don't need to actually purchase or install the software. You can simply upload your photo and use the online tools to make changes. It takes a little bit longer than the installed software that does the same, but it certainly is available. Animated images used to be very popular. We'd have a small photograph or sequence of photographs, and they would animate by simply repeating through those photos. Most popular are the animated GIFs, which is a particular format for photographs. And you do tend to see those a lot in primary school websites and so forth, but they are becoming less and less popular. Screencasting we've talked a little bit about, but this is where you do exactly what I'm doing at the moment. You record what's happening on your screen. I'm using a tool called QuickTime or QuickTime Player, which is installed as part of installed on all Apple computers. But you can also download other tools for use on Windows-based computers such as Cam Studio, and there's a whole range of other ones as well. And they simply record whatever you're doing on the screen and save that as a file. Or there's some online ones that you can also use. Jing is one I use a fair bit, but there's also more advanced ones, Snagit and Camtasia, which will record what you do on your screen and save it directly to the internet, and then allow you to share that. They do, though, tend to be limited in the amount of time you can do the recordings for. So once you've got your recording, then you might want to make some modifications to it. Otherwise, you've simply got to do lots and lots of takes. But it's easier nowadays to actually just edit the video rather than try to do everything perfect in one long take, and then if you mess up anywhere along that, going and starting again and retaking this. Doing lots of small takes and then editing those together tends to be much more efficient and effective. And there's various free video editing software such as iMovie, which is included on all Apple devices, and Movie Maker for Windows, which is freely available to download. But then you've got more complex ones such as Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro, which give you more functionality. But there's also, again, increasingly free online video editing tools, such as those incorporated into YouTube or Video Toolbox. And there's even some collaborative ones where students can work together on the editing process. And these tools are such as Pixorial and WeVideo, which allow you to actually edit together, and that's particularly useful in doing group projects or for teachers preparing lesson material together. Finally, we've got a section on 3D modeling. Now this is where we actually create three-dimensional objects and incorporate those into our teaching. Now probably the most popular tool for creating 3D objects is SketchUp, and again there's a free version and there's also an education license available for free for the professional version. And this allows you to make very quick and easy 3D models. And there's also a huge repository of existing 3D models. So if you want a 3D model of a dinosaur or a spaceship or the Eiffel Tower or pretty much anything you can think of nowadays, you can download that and incorporate that into whatever you might be making, or simply use it directly. Very popular for students, where they can use the 3D modeling to create things such as they're learning about castles, they can make their own castle. If they're learning about the pyramids, make their own pyramid. If they're learning about shapes in mathematics, create those shapes and see the interactions between them, etc. So lots of different opportunities to incorporate 3D printing, and then, 3D modeling, and then there's the latest aspect of 3D printing, whereby we can actually print out what students have designed and make physical models from those. Now you can initially do, say, 3D printing in terms of cardboard, whereby we can print it out and then print it out using a normal paper-based printer, and then fold the cardboard into the 3D shapes. And that's a great activity to do, and there's lots of different objects we can create in buildings and very complex models that we can produce doing out of paper. But then there's more complex ones where we can use CNC machining, which is where we cut it out of other objects. But 3D printing is probably the most popular at the moment, whereby we extrude plastic and use that plastic to slowly build up a three-dimensional object. And we can produce pretty much anything, well, a lot of things, using 3D printing. And it helps students understand that that's the future of manufacturing, where we've now got 3D printing where we can print out objects in metal and pretty much any, even food. They're doing 3D printing of different foods now. And we can also even print out organic parts. So for example, printing out an ear made out of organic material. So there's a whole range of different and we're not doing that in schools yet, but that's for the future. At the moment though, 3D printing of plastic is very popular, and we'll be looking at that in our on-campus workshop. So there's lots of fun stuff that you can do with 3D paper modeling, and you can also do a lot of 3D modeling with Lego. And there's some software and websites where you can actually design your Lego on the computer and then go away and build that with Lego pieces. If it's not too complex, you may not have enough Lego to actually do the building. And then the other big popular area for 3D modeling is in the sandbox game Minecraft, where within this game environment, students can build their own objects out of basic blocks, and students have been able to create some very, very impressive and complex objects and environments in the Minecraft environment. And there's also services to allow us to print those environments out in 3D paper models and even to 3D printing models out of plastic. So lots of different opportunities to incorporate various aspects of technology in that respect. So in this module, we've explored a whole range of basic ICTs that would be expected of all teachers to be incorporating into their teaching and learning. Now, not all of them all the time, but certainly you should have a familiarization with all of those and have them as part of your suite of tools and technologies that you can incorporate where appropriate for the teaching of your students.